Hello everyone, this is Ash and Simon from the Nice Game headquarters with the second part of our Battleground era overview. In the first video we showed you the first era, 3 of the first era Battlegrounds, and this time around we'll show you what's new in the second era.
That's right, this is the second era, so this is game 4 that this comes into play. And the way that eras function in Vampire the Masquerade Heritage is that we have 3 battlegrounds all the time, and as we transition from one era to the next, one of the battlegrounds changes. So in this case, we have removed the battleground for clans high and low, and we have replaced that with the battleground for the Inquisition. So we're going to go into that right now.
Alright, so the new battleground in the second era is the Inquisition, and this represents the mortal resistance to the vampires actually that began in the Middle Ages and that vampires have feared but also used in their own schemes and machinations.
Yeah. Thematically, this begins the long arc of the kind of rise of humanity as like a power that vampires have to take seriously, and this connects with several of the battlegrounds that are to come. But for now, we see that the kind of more or less open feudal dominance of vampires is something they have to rein in because the Inquisition is out to get them if they're not careful. In Heritage, every time you recruit or activate a character in your bloodline, they're going to change or have some effect on each of the 3 battlegrounds. And every one of the battlegrounds is related to a particular gem or attribute on that character. So if we look at this character here, the Outcast, he's got 3 of these attributes. In this case, the Inquisition, we're looking at actually two parts of the character. First of all, we're looking at the top left gem, which is either red or green. In this case, it's green because he's sort of from the lower clans.
The rebel. The
rebel, indeed. He is the Outcast. And we're also going to be looking at his archetype, which is clandestine in this case because he's a little bit sneaky. So what happens when we recruit a character and the Inquisition is in play? First of all, we're going to look at the battlegrounds. So we can see that there are 2 states. There's the Vaticanum, and then there's the Judices. So the Vaticanum is when the witch hunters, when the Inquisition is not suspicious, when they're not actively looking for vampires. But that's about to change because we've just done something vampirically. We've added a character to our bloodline, and so they're going to become suspicious. So we go to the clandestine column, and we just take that token, which can be either red or green. If it was already red, we would flip it. Since it was already green, we're going to keep it the same, and we just slide it to the bottom, and that's it. And this represents the Inquisitors looking for clandestine, lower class sort of vampires. They're starting to get suspicious.
So you're going to keep recruiting characters, making more Inquisitors suspicious until it reaches a kind of tipping point. And that would, for example, happen when we recruit the Executioner in this board state. So he's a red warrior, and so we have to move down this token. And now what happens is all 4 Inquisitors are suspicious, and they are going to move out and start hunting vampires.
So the Inquisition is on the hunt for vampires, but who will they hunt? We have a test now to see who is the most infamous vampire or vampires, and that is as simple as looking for infamy, which in this tabletop sim version are these yellow gems that you can see. The most infamous vampire, the vampire with the most of these, is going to be targeted by the Inquisition. Now, if they have enough infamy, they will be placed into torpor. They will be killed by the Inquisition. If they don't have enough, all that's going to happen is that they gain more infamy. But what this means is that when the Inquisition comes knocking next time, they might be killed.
After the hunt, we reset this board and we're ready for the next characters to raise suspicion and get the Inquisition on their trail again.
Now, like all battlegrounds, there is a scheme that allows us to manipulate this one directly. And this is the first in the series which doesn't involve just activating a coterie. the way that this battleground scheme works is that once some of the archetypes are under suspicion, for example, if the Inquisition was looking for scholarly vampires or for wealthy vampires, once the Inquisition is already suspicious, you're able to come here to this scheme and activate it to assign infamy to any vampire of that archetype. And of course, assigning infamy at this point is a way to make sure that when the Inquisition does come hunting, they're not coming for your vampires, they're coming for his vampires. Your vampires, that's right.
At the end of the game, we're going to take a look at this board and see which of the sides has managed to avoid suspicion more efficiently. So in this case, we see that there's only one suspicion token for the red side, 3 suspicion tokens for the green side. That means all red characters are going to gain 1 victory point.
The Inquisition is one of my favorite battlegrounds, actually, because it is very interactive. There's a take that element. It's very thematic, and there's real strategic choices to be made. So the broad strategy, I believe, it's sort of like a lot of the battlegrounds, it's how much to participate and how much to invest in it. So one of the things that happens at the start of the game is there's a race to become the first vampire to assign infamy to somebody else's bloodline. If they could do it themselves, if they're foolish enough to be the first one to just attract the Inquisition, but that's a bad position to be in. It makes you the target. There's typically 1, maybe 2 vampires that are going to be hunted by the Inquisition, and once it's not you, once it's somebody else, then my job is to trigger the Inquisition, because it can take a variable number of turns depending on which archetypes we recruit. So the first thing is there's a race to make somebody else the fall guy and not you when the Inquisition comes knocking, which I just love. And then the other thing is, okay, now that that's happened to me, now I'm the guy, now my vampire is going to be targeted by the Inquisition. When they come, assuming I don't have too much infamy, the worst that can happen is I gain 1 more infamy and then it's reset. So maybe it's worth sort of ignoring for this point, waiting until it becomes a bigger problem later, and just focusing on other things. Now, the reason you might do that is, let's say I respond, I can actually just trigger the battleground scheme, and now I'm going to assign infamy to the other player's bloodline, making them the target. That's great, that's good for me now, but what we're doing is we're sort of ratcheting up the amount of infamy in play, making it more likely when the Inquisition does come knocking that someone's going to get torpid. So in my mind, that's very thematic. We're sort of making a ruckus here, and it's in nobody's interest to do that. So it's about sort of deciding when to cut your losses, when to accept that you are going to be targeted by the Inquisition, and it's not so bad.
Right. One of the things that I feel that's also quite thematic and interesting, also strategy-wise, is sometimes you just gotta let go of that very infamous character, right? Sometimes there comes a moment where the points that you're going to lose from keeping this guy alive, from all the infamy, is actually worse than what you would get when you keep him alive.
Yeah, and the reason that is because infamy, so power is worth 1 point at the end of the game, and infamy is worth -1 point. So if you have a really infamous, if you've got like the Dracula, like everyone knows this guy and everybody hates him and he's killing people all around the place.
Sometimes you kill this guy yourself.
Exactly, sometimes you can trigger the Inquisition to clean up this mess for you, and this is something that kind of runs through Heritage. Is this idea that, like, yeah, the execution is in my bloodline, like he's my guy, but by the same token, I will drop him instantly if it's not in my if he's not helping me anymore. So your relationship with these characters is not like protective. It's very cutthroat even within your own bloodline.
So one thing that kind of differentiates the Inquisition from other battlegrounds is that the end game scoring is really rather unpredictable during the beginning stages and even the middle stages of the game. So what you're going to do is, in those stages, you're going to focus on the hunting other vampires, blaming other vampires, framing other vampires and giving them infamy, not so much trying to set up the board for a eventual victory. One thing that's actually kind of cool to set up with the Inquisition is managing the infamy in just the right way, using the scheme or some other ways, so that you can target multiple vampires at the same time, hopefully by different players. So with the Inquisition in play, it becomes very important where you place that infamy. It's very nice if you can target it towards a vampire that's up the bloodline, that has many childer, many potential coterie members. You can really cripple someone.
Yeah, it really it changes the infamy from being about the net points gained or lost at the end of the game into a very specific puzzle about where this infamy is at this point in time, who's going to be staked if the Inquisition comes a knocking, and how you can just nudge that, because you don't have to be the least infamous, you don't have to have zero infamy or anything like that, you just have to be the one that's not staked. So that is the end of this video. We have explained the new battleground that comes into play in the second era, and as always, you still have the other two battlegrounds to consider. Stay tuned. We will be continuing the series with Era 3, the Anarch Revolts.